Yeah, I've been getting consistently a lot of people asking about, especially the show, the haphazard show that we have at the moment, asking about, how it's like being a barrister, going through the bar. And I think a very interesting thing about all three of us that we have in common is that we went through the bar, we became barristers, and then somehow we all decided to leave the profession. So a lot of people are asking about it, what we've learned and why, the experience, and also why we left. And I thought it would be an interesting episode for all three of us to do.
I think people like the bar, particularly in the intellectual capacity. So there's kind of intellect, discussions, and kind of broadening the mind, but also the kind of the image that people have portrayed the bar. I don't know, over the past 10, 20 years.
Well, I think people in Hong Kong thought of the bar as the peak of the social ladder. Back in the days, barristers was in the highest level of society. That's my impression anyway, which is interesting because in traditional Chinese society, being a lawyer wasn't particularly regarded as a very good profession, but it's clearly different in British Hong Kong. So I suppose that's why, because the best you could do is to become a barrister. Back in the days, you couldn't exactly become the governor of Hong Kong, could you?
I think there's been a lot of mystery as well. Of course, we know the barristers being part of the English legal system, but it's always been a sort of like a very secretive sort of profession in a way. Of course, especially in the UK, you've got those honourable societies that you have to be part of, these members dining, almost like a Hogwarts sort of place. And so a lot of the things are up to the imagination of people who are not part of the profession. I think both of you guys have mentioned it greatly, especially Arthur, in the idea that it's very intellectual, very demanding, you have to be very educated. And also Joe, of course, the impression, the assumption that this is part of the higher social ladder. But perfect setup for the next thing that people have asked, which is, was it actually like that going through the bar?
I think intellectually, yes. But I think in terms of the work-wise, I think it's a very different, very different side of the story. It's hard work, I think. But then there's some kind of mystique, as you say. There's honourable societies, and the tradition do come with the bar, and I have to say it has continued for quite a while.
My impression has always been the same as Lord Newburger's view. That law isn't actually as hard as some of the subjects that we studied. I mean, certainly I find law easier than mathematics. Lord Newburger actually graded the subjects in the following order. He said that mathematics was the hardest subject, then physics, chemistry, and biology. And compared to the humanities, law would be at about the same level as biology. So he studied at Christ Church, Oxford, my old college, and he thought chemistry was still harder than law. So when he switched to law, he found it easier than he thought, and that's why he joined the profession. And that, I have to say, is my view. I found mathematics to be way harder than law, which I later studied. So no, I do completely respect it as a very intellectual discipline, but I don't think it's exactly the hardest discipline that I've ever come across.
Although you might say that intellectually mathematics might be more demanding, but certainly, at least in my experience, going through the bar itself, the actual work that's involved going through the bar, actually going through the bar exams, and even going through pupillage, it is actually very demanding in terms of the sort of exertion you have to go through. You're literally doing all the grunt work. And it's interesting because people would have this sort of impression that, the moment you go through the bar, you'll be like this big shot barrister, you'll be in court, up on the stand and getting all this limelight. But most of the time, at least starting out, there's so much grunt work.
I agree, absolutely. Dealing with client expectations. I mean, one of the issues I really had practicing at the bar was I had clients who were just paranoid and perhaps had psychological issues arising out of their legal situation, and I have clients who constantly tried to become a legal expert themselves, providing all sorts all sorts of legal opinions as a layperson to me, and I had to be replying emails late into the night, telling them that actually I am the qualified barrister, and it's just the client, lay client, to be specific, and that to me was one of my most challenging moments at the bar, because I had to keep them happy while letting them know that I was the one who's going to do the work. I did find that rather challenging.
Quite similar to Joe's point, I think, managing expectations, but also in terms of the work that goes into it. It needs to be top quality, very good standard, and you start to question yourself a lot of the time whether it is right or not what you've put in there, and then you take it back out and then you put it back in. So the kind of process of debating with yourself is quite fun, but it is quite dark as well, because you do overwork your brain a lot of the time, and also the pressing deadline. Time is of the essence, so you don't have any rest at all, so you have to get it, or otherwise it could be very serious in some cases. So.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because from the very get-go of actually starting bar school and actually going through the entire thing, one thing I've discovered, which is quite dark for me, is just the limits of the human body, because there were so many sleepless nights that I had to go through. Literally, even in London, I remember just seeing the sun rise almost every day, and then same cycle, going in and actually getting the opinions that we have to work on, and then actually working on that in the evening time all the way till sunrise. And it's just, I developed, I suppose, a superpower to not sleep, and it's just been the same as well when I actually went through pupillage and started working as a barrister. It is incredibly demanding, and truly a job that requires so much from you, which is very interesting, because of course people, they don't really see this side of actually becoming a barrister.
Well, I had only been at the bar for 24 months before I took my name off the bar list, so I can't say.
Don't tell me that's the proudest moment. That would be a blow.
I was quite proud, to be honest, because I had some great exit opportunities. One thing that I think, should I be given a second chance, I would choose differently, is that I almost exclusively did civil cases when I became a full tenant of the set of chambers that I joined, and it was a civil set. But looking back, I think my temperament suited criminal more. For civil cases, you naturally had to do more, paperwork, and that's just not something that I really enjoyed. But that was too late. I had joined that set, and that's what they do. So I had no other choice.
I think this is a perfect segue, actually, to one of the key questions of tonight, which is, why did you decide to leave the bar and the profession? I think we're going to start with Arthur.
Well, at the moment, I am a importer of wine in the UK, and I like wine. Well, I could say I love wine. Nice. Since at university or before that. I think it is about having achieved something, but you have to think about whether the long term is right for you. Some people say the bar is a vacation. Some people say you should experience other things, and I wanted to experience other things. I've worked in various with various politicians before, and also, actually, funny thing is, I wanted to go into the bar at the beginning was politics.
I see.
So a lot of our famous politicians, for example, Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair, Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, were barristers, and I thought,
Arthur, none of them was a great lawyer. Thatcher never.
And that's why they didn't want to carry on.
I see.
So I think they've changed from being a barrister to a politician. I thought, I thought wine might be something good to do, and probably politics in the future. Who knows?
I hope it wasn't the bar that drove you to wine. As a coping mechanism. What about you, Joe? You've touched on it a bit, but perhaps you can elaborate a bit more.
Yeah, well, I just like to add to the point that Arthur was making. Not that interestingly, not that many British politicians actually came from a background of having practiced at the bar for a long time. I mean, Tony Blair, I think, is the only law graduate to have become prime minister in the history of the UK, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, there have been many people who were called to the bar back in the days, even in the times of William Gladstone and perhaps Robert Peel. You know, they were all members of inns such as Lincoln's Inn, but none of them was a proper QC or anything like that. I think one or two might have been, but that's it. So to say that being a lawyer is a gateway to being a politician isn't quite the common route in the UK, but in the States, yes. I mean, many of them have a JD and might have practiced for a longer time. But I joined the bar simply because I didn't know what to do when I was about to graduate from Oxford. I mean, that's the problem of Oxbridge. They get you to do academic degrees without preparing you for a career. We were actually rather proud of having done no preparation for careers. So when I was in my third year, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I had done no proper job searches at all. The Oxford Career Department is totally rubbish. So I didn't know what to do, honestly. I mean, it's very true. And I didn't know what I wanted to do after that. I just wanted to spend a year and study law and see how it goes. And turned out it went quite well, because honestly, I found it easier than what I had been studying. And that led me to get qualified and get called to the bar. I honestly just stumbled upon the career. I didn't know what else to do. I was constitutionally unable to be employed. I just didn't want to, do any salaried jobs. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. It was quite shallow, to be honest, but that's what I did. And I was good enough. The thing is, I was good enough to secure a scholarship from the Bar Association here, and I was also able to secure a good tenancy. So that's how I started my career. What got me out of it was because of partly politics too. As soon, Arthur, I don't know if you know, but as soon as I joined the bar, I decided to run for district council election.
Really?
Yeah, that was really stupid of me, but I'm just quite an adventurer.
You continue the tradition, it seems.
And you know what the funny thing is, my set of chambers was considered to be very political, so they wholeheartedly supported my doing. So I went for it, and I lost. But the funny thing is, it got me into the limelight, and the journalists in Hong Kong just fell in love with me, because they thought that there's this rather controversial guy being able to speak his mind all the time, and I started to constantly appear in the news, and that gave me too high a profile to stay on as a lowly junior barrister. That's basically what happened. But a direct reason that led me away from the bar was that two barristers in 2017 got caught in a divorce case and a traffic offence case in court, and for some reason they had to disclose their earnings, and I knew both of them. They were not senior counsel, but they were right below that level, so rather senior, 20 plus years of experience. But they were both making less than 200k per month in Hong Kong dollars. Now, I don't know how you feel about that figure, but being ambitious as I was, I felt that was a bit, not enough. That honestly is my view. I know that some people might think that that's quite a lot, but I had bigger ambitions. So honestly, my thinking at the time was that I need more than that, and things were looking like I was only going to be making that much by the time I got to their level, taking into consideration inflation, and so I was quietly dissatisfied. And luckily, at the time, a few other opportunities came about that gave me potentially a much higher income. So I took on those opportunities and left the bar.
Well, the thing I'll add to that is actually, for me especially, was I felt the entire profession, although it was actually quite rewarding in many ways, I've always felt it was also a bit limited in the sense of the work that we did. I mean, both of you have actually mentioned it a bit, but for me particularly, it would be just a sense that we're always really working within the system, a system of law, and obviously trying to navigate through that to help our clients. But it always felt quite constricted in a way, working within that system. And I've always desired really something more limitless. And so for me personally, I've decided to actually go into business. And I found that to be much more intellectually challenging and rewarding at the same time. I've always felt, especially when it comes to barristers, and of course, even lawyers generally, it really comes down to who, as Joe has mentioned, who's better prepared, but not just in the cases, even how they were educated. It makes a massive difference, really. And whereas in the world of business, it really is quite a level playing field in many ways. You could easily be, challenged or disrupted by someone entirely from ground up. And it just has this true sense of challenge that I just did not find in the bar.
I think in terms of reward, the more that you put in terms of business, you do feel a sense of satisfaction of the work that you put in, because a lot of the time I think, I don't know if it's same with you or Joe, is you put a lot of work in for the client, but then the kind of reward and satisfaction might not be as the same or as high as being in business. So yeah, I do agree with that. And the level of flexibility that it brings in terms of business, and also it still fires up your own passion of what you want to do. So you're not really restricted in saying you have to do this today, you have to kind of rush on some other deadline. You could kind of model yourself in a way that it suits you and it suits your life.
Yeah, well, I completely understand how you feel, Mel. I mean, the problem is it's just so dry. Spending hours and hours doing researches and then having to draw up the skeleton argument is just intellectually engaging, perhaps slightly narrow if you do it day in, day out. So I completely understand. The earning that you make has to be much higher for it to be justified. And and the problem exactly is that I wasn't exactly motivated by the level of earnings we were making. So for me, no. And I have to say, other than us three, I've been talking to many friends who also recently left the bar in Hong Kong. I was only with one on Christmas Eve. She hadn't practiced for longer, but she also left the bar. And I have to say, she shares our views on the bar, and she's now into business too. And I see her much happier than she used to be.
Although we've left the profession, certainly there were many things that probably we experienced through the profession that imparted great lessons on us. And I remember this dining experience I had with this QC. At the time, I was still going through pupillage, and it was just really stressful. Especially, I just couldn't imagine myself always in that situation, particularly at certain times in a very adversarial setting, of course, being, in the legal profession where you're always going against someone. I was really stressed and oftentimes very anxious and also very nervous. And this QC gave me this amazing advice, because I remember I asked him, I said, how do you actually handle all the pressure and all the stress? And he said to me, amazingly, this thing that really shaped my life today, he said, when you're actually dealing with clients and when you're actually a barrister, and in fact, working in this profession, you're no longer you. In many ways, you're actually very much like a different person, in the sense that people are actually depending on you. They depend on you, on your competence to actually do well, because the difference between doing well and not doing well for the clients is practically just oblivion. Their entire lives at stake for various reasons. And so in that moment, you can't afford to be nervous or be stressed, because in a way, you're no longer you. You are supposed to be the representative of the people that you actually work for. So personal emotions have to be, sidestepped, because again, people depend on you. And it was very beautiful advice because it stuck with me today, especially in my role as a director for several companies. Sometimes I have to deal with very high stress situations. But again, I always recall just that speech he gave me, that no, I'm in a way no longer me. I can't afford to be selfish and think about my personal sentiments, especially when people depend on you. And that's been a very powerful lesson that I've learned.
I agree with your point about being adversarial, but then that's part of my nature. I'm naturally arguing. So I didn't need that from the bar. But the one thing that I keep reminding myself, how right it is that I spent time being trained for the bar and then practiced the bar, is that I wouldn't have picked up my presentation skills had I not been at the bar. I mean, I'm now mostly doing a bit of chat show stuff and usually being the interviewee rather than the host. I don't enjoy being the host as much. Doing my own insurance business, and it's all about being clear, expressing myself in a good way, and it's clear to me that most people who haven't been through the training that I did simply aren't able to articulate themselves as well. And I think the bar gives us this sense of confidence as well as the ability to talk our way out of difficult situations. And I just have to be thankful because I wouldn't be able to do that without the rigorous training that I had.
Going to your point in terms of lessons learned, I think there's two kind of categories. One is wisdom, the second is human behaviors. In terms of wisdom, in the bar, I think when you talk to judges and lawyers and seniors, they give you a lot of insight into what they've seen over the past 20, 30 years, which young barristers, especially a lot of juniors, I might not have that experience. So this wisdom, it broadens your knowledge in quite a small amount of time, but understanding that there's quite a lot of things to learn, and that's to do with life, as in business. There's not a lot of time in business, but you have to learn a lot, a heck of a lot, in terms of achieving what you want to. The second one, human behaviors, I think in terms of cases or research that you've done on case law, that human behavior is sometimes quite repetitive, and you learn from history that humans would act in a certain way in some points or some circumstances. So it is quite useful in terms of business or even politics, in terms of human behaviors, in terms of negotiation negotiation skills with someone, and being very calm and knowing that you'll succeed when you strategize by yourself. So because strategy is also another thing which we learn in law schools or doing the bar, and it's that strategic approach that I think I've learned a lot on.
Any parting words of wisdom for those who are considering the bar, aspiring barristers? Anything that you'd say to them?
Go in and enjoy it while it lasts.
While it lasts.
That's rather pessimistic. No, I think anything you do in your 20s will just be a great experience later on in your life. So don't judge too much, don't think too much, and just do it. I think throw yourself into it, and if it's not for you, you can come back out and do other stuff, and don't think it's time wasted, because honestly, I think the skills picked up will be very, very useful in whatever discipline that you pursue later on. If you look at it that way, then I think it will be some time well spent.
I think you put it nicely. Basically, the idea that what we're really looking at here with this profession is that it's not so much a destination, but really a pathway. For a lot of people, they just think about being a barrister. I'm sure all of us had at one point, but it's really a starting point that might bounce you elsewhere, and the experiences that you gather from it just be so valuable in shaping your future.